This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Welcome back, everybody. It is something that is on the radar of most of us, and then we wonder, what's the good, what's the bad? I am talking about artificial intelligence, AI. It is emerging. So many more people are using ChatGPT and other platforms. Should we be using it for everything? How is it changing our work landscape? We're going to talk with somebody today that is well-versed in that and more. As a company called Blue Ocean Global Technology, and they provide digital transformation, business consulting, technology development services, and so much more. The founder is Somal, and he joins us on the program today. How are you doing?
I'm always thankful, Steve, for what we have. Thanks so much for having me, and delighted to be here, make a new friend in you, as mentioned.
Yes, it's great to have you here, and especially with your background. You got a lot going on. You've been doing this company in itself, been around over 10 years. Before we get into the AI topic today, I wanna just focus on for a moment. You have a company that you founded, Girl Power USA. Tell us about that.
Yeah, Steve, we have a foundation, Girl Power USA, that supports causes in about 15 countries. And we're big believers that social impact and driving progress in terms of being a voice for those who don't have one and helping less privileged people doesn't have to be mutually exclusive of women and people being ambitious and intelligent in terms of business and entrepreneurship. And so we have a separate company, Girl Power Talk, that's based in India that employs women in 40 countries. The two work hand in hand. And I always say, imagine a fictional book where young people are happy and there's intellectual freedom and they're learning, growing, and creating together. And now imagine making it real, following that notion of Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we have an incredible culture built by young people, for young people. Of course, we have a lot of, age-wise, older people as well that are part of us that are in the community. But I guess you can say I'm the guy behind Girl Power Talk.
Wow, wonderful. And it is a 501c3?
Girl Power Talk is a company, and then our 501c3, Girl Power USA, is the two work hand in hand. Yeah.
Beautiful. You said intellectual for a moment there, and right away that gets me into intellectual property, and that gets me into AI. I'm not even sure, honestly, where to begin with it, because there's so many aspects of it. And it hasn't even really truly been defined what is acceptable in terms of using AI. So many pictures you see now, they're all just generated. They're not even real. There's no disclosure where the pictures came from. What's your overall feeling of AI right now?
Yeah, look, I think ultimately, like it or not, artificial intelligence is part of our daily lives. It's here to stay. Whether it's ChatGPT or the smartphones or Alexa, its applications are accepted norms. But ultimately, I think people drive artificial intelligence. They're the ones behind it. Of course, AI is unique because in its ability to learn and modify from itself, allows it to bring in efficiencies. And learning is at the heart of, I think, great human beings, as well as intentional artificial intelligence. And it's a process. And so for AI to be effective, it needs to have a feedback loop, often with human input and collaboration. It just so happens, you mentioned intellectual property, legal end. I am an expert witness and litigation consultant on a wide range of issues related to intellectual property, economic damages, economic analysis, business disputes. And, the rapid artificial intelligence adoption, it's outpacing legal frameworks. And so, courtroom analytics, AI is not hypothetical. It's active in discovery, compliance, and legal decision making. And, there's a number of case studies as well as examples. Even something like contracts review and predictive analytics, Lex Machina, Ravel, e-discovery. I mean, there's no way a human being can go through thousands and millions of documents faster and more effectively. I mean, things like I have attorneys. I recently did a CLE program for the New York State Bar on AI and legal research. And one of the attorneys on it was like, wow, I found out after your program that we subscribe to the tool that looks at the judge on your particular case, all their past rulings, and what is their language in the favorable briefs that they've ultimately sided with, and gives like an output. And he's like, I have access to that tool, but I have no idea how to use it. He's like, can you help me with that? And I didn't even know about that until then. So, I think that AI is at this critical inflection point from a legal standpoint, and people are wrestling with how to apply it, how to use it. It's also one of those challenges where people are a little uncomfortable and they don't know where to get started. And I think at a most basic level for companies and individuals, you got to accept it and, kind of walk slowly, never walk backwards. Abraham Lincoln.
I'm glad you started talking about the legal aspect, the court aspect. Do you think it would ever be at some point in the next few years, maybe way down the road, maybe it's more probable, but AI rendering court decisions based on previous decisions?
I would say likely not in our lifetime. I don't think there's any chance things take place. I also think that no matter what, there's going to have to retain a human element with respect to the court of law and making decisions, because ultimately it's the interpretation. I think increasingly artificial intelligence will help though people make more informed decisions, and it will augment and, for lack of a better word, replace many of the things that aren't done as effectively. But I don't think it's replacing, a judge anytime soon per se.
How about some best practices in AI? Recently, I was looking closer at it and I'm thinking, where's the protection? A lot of people are throwing in personal information, generate a proposal. Here's some fine details, on and on and on and on. That information can go anywhere, right?
Yeah, well, the reality of it is the internet is great and wonderful because we have unfiltered access to information, but the other side of it is that you can't control it. And I happen to unfortunately know a lot about people who have dealt with situations where their data privacy and information has either gone viral or is defining their online narrative. I think that people need to use only what they need in terms of limiting their personal and sensitive information. I think you do need to have some context on how to, make things anonymous and encrypt. When you have models, you have to secure them. You can use model watermarking, you can use monitoring to kind of detect unauthorized use. And of course, from a regulatory standpoint, when you're auditing, you have to be thoughtful. I mean, for instance, deep fake detection and protection tools for media companies are now essential to make sure that what they're looking at, reviewing, and using is actual human beings and not, driven by artificial intelligence.
I kind of laughed recently in hearing that there is an app to humanize AI. I think it's called Humanify. So, we start with a human plugging it into AI. AI spits it out, but now we want it to look more human, or at least sound, whatever the case may be. So now we throw it through another app, Humanify, to make it more human. It's almost like back to the beginning again.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of a cartoon that I'd shared when I delivered a keynote presentation to a group of CEOs, and it had human beings like on their phones, and it had like robots reading books. Go figure.
That's actually very funny. Other things that we should know or consider about AI, what do you want to share?
One, if you don't like change, you'll like irrelevance even less. You have to make sure that you're being efficient and thoughtful. Just look at, if we're talking to people, in a little bit older generations, look at the proliferation of the internet. So AI is here to stay, and I think that it can save an incredible amount of time. Again, you need to make sure that it's intentional and purposeful. And, there are a few things that are wholly good or wholly evil, but rather an inseparable combination of the two. And that, of course, is my personal hero, Abraham Lincoln, who I just can't help but bring his thoughts to mind, being studied on the subject. But I think that we just need to embrace it and recognize that it can make our lives better. At the same time, the connection that people have in relationships are going to continue to drive opportunities in our lifetime. And so it's a challenge for younger generations who rely so much on technology and AI, and then they get to a job interview, they get to a networking event, they're struggling to connect with people and emotional intelligence and all those things. So that's a whole, paradigm shift.
We're thinking the same, because I that's where I was going to go next, in that, do you think in terms of trends that we're going to start going back to actually having a phone conversation, actually reaching out to somebody, maybe handwriting a letter, because everything is so benignly digital that there's no human touch points anymore? Do you think that's, that might come back, at least for a period of time?
Look, it's ironic that technology brings us close to people far away, me and you, being maybe 100 miles apart or so in Pennsylvania, New York, and takes us away from those people right next to us. So I'm, Steve, of the belief that we have to leverage technology, but the authenticity and fundamentals of some of the things you mentioned. Look, I look on my desk. Here's a handwritten note that I've written to somebody that's going out, and
wonderful.
That piece of paper is going to sit on somebody's desk, and it's going to become part of life. Or this is a book that I'm mailing to a particular friend of mine, the Lincoln Treasury, because he just calls me. This client and friend calls me all the time just so I can give Lincoln anecdotes and yarns. And that book is going to be part of his home or part of his office, and those things are going to keep me atop of mind and show him that I genuinely value who he is and I listen to kind of what he says. So I think that I don't think those things are going to come back in vogue. I think they're going to be more and more relics. But I think the people that are thoughtful about the authenticity of following up. I oftentimes say, so one of the subjects that I've been engaged to speak on all over the world is on how to build relationship capital on and offline. Not because I wanted to talk about it, but people said, Samir, you build relationships faster and more effectively than anyone we've ever met. Like come talk about that. And I said, okay, so you're going to pay me $25,000 to come speak on how to build relationships. There's no faster way to make friends. And so I was incredibly blessed when I've been able to do that. And what I share in that is that the fortune is ultimately in the follow-up. You might as well not go to an event if you're not going to email somebody and call them and follow up. You brought up a point earlier about calling. When I'm maybe going for a run in the morning, or I'm thinking, I'm writing on a piece of paper, hey, who are some of the people that I need to get in touch with, and calling people and calling them, not when you need something, calling them to check in on how they're doing, and people that you really enjoy who they are. And I think that's where people ask, Samir, how do you have such positive energy? I say, because I give so much of that out, and it comes back to me multifold. So I really appreciate the question, and it's obvious that we're cut from the same type of cloth. Writing a letter, to somebody, and I look down over here, I've got some handwritten letters that are set to go out. So at the same time, you need to leverage technology, your digital presence. Somebody meets Samir, they see he's going to speak at an event. They have a conversation. They get an email from me. They get somebody on my team, sends them a LinkedIn request, etc. They're going to Google me, and maybe they ignore me, but maybe I like them and admire them, and I sent them a handwritten note, and they get that note, and then they're going to look me up online, and they're going to make judgments based upon some of those tangibles, as well as some of the things digitally speaking. So yeah, certainly a subject I have a lot of fun helping people and genuinely sharing information so others can make more informed decisions on that.
Follow-up is everything, isn't it?
Always. I think that you and I will appreciate that is one of the most valuable, I think, elements of just life, following up with people. Say what you mean what you say. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that people say, Samir, you follow up more thoughtfully and more patiently and with more purpose than anyone I've ever met. And I think that's been a reason why I've been able to accelerate the growth of our companies over the last few years.
So I want to go back on what you just said. Say what you mean what you say, and ... I'm going to add to that. Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. because many times, we'll say what we mean, but we say it in such a way that maybe you should have filtered it. Maybe it should have been presented in a different way just to speak your truth.
Yeah, I think that kindness is free. If it's such a good idea to tell somebody off, it'll be a good idea. 2 days from now, it'll be a good idea a week from now. I think that humility is the essence of life, and you can't. I resist. As human beings, we have blind spots, and we judge no matter what we say. It's like, when you meet someone, it's like when I go to a conference. I was at this conference, the National Association of Corporate Directors. It was an incredible event, the one I was at last year. I mean, Bill Gates was the closing keynote, and all sorts of awesome, exciting people. And I get these really prominent women who are board directors or chairwoman of United Airlines or, head of Grant Thornton, and they'd see like Samir Sama, and they'd see like Girl Power Talk. And I'd walk up being so shy and introducing myself and saying, hey, let's be friends, let's talk. And they immediately start looking at my badge. And then they're like, and as I start to talk about what Girl Power Talk is, and I can see them judging and figuring out, okay, is this somebody that I can easily write off, or, oh my goodness, I kind of resonate what he's saying. So I think that being intentional in that regard, one conversation at a time, and trying to help people and see where they want to go and be part of that journey, instead of looking at networking relationships as hey, what can I get? The proverbial taker from, Give and Take, Adam Grant's book. I just think that the easiest way to build relationships and be successful is to truly figure out how to be valuable to somebody else and to do the things. One of my favorite compliments is, Samir, I've only known you 3 months, and you've done more for me than people that I call my best friends. And to me, that I think creates loyalty and creates opportunity.
Totally right there with you. I won't even do a post. I won't put anything out there unless I feel that somebody gets value from it. I don't need to take a picture of my food and post it unless there's a reason that, that I have found this great restaurant. Did you know? Whatever it may be, there needs to be that shared value. I want to talk about Abraham Lincoln. Where did that begin for you? Your affinity for him, some of his values, all of that. Where did that start?
Yeah, it was funny because you read about people in history, and I'm one of those people that's like a closet bibliophile, and spend a lot of time in books. And the thing about Lincoln is, of course, ostensibly most people feel, okay, he emancipated slaves, and of course he's perhaps the most revered person in American history. More books published about Abraham Lincoln than anyone else in history, second to Jesus Christ. He's number 2. And Lincoln, when you lift up the hood, so for me it was after graduating college, I got this book, Abraham Lincoln by Carl Sandburg, which is like a pretty thick book. He was a poet. He wrote a famous 6-book set. The first 2 books called The Prairie Years. The last 4 books called The War Years. They won the Pulitzer in 1939. And I read this 6-book set. And in it was integrated some of his actual writings and, lines from Lincoln that you say, wow, and he said that, Judge Douglas has created such a specious and fantastic arrangement of words that he has actually proven that a horse chestnut is the same as the chestnut colored horse. I mean, you just see like, wow, like Lincoln was on a cognitive level. But the thing that got me to fall in love with Lincoln is, one, Lincoln is lovable. Lincoln is relatable. Lincoln was funny. Lincoln didn't just go from poverty to becoming the president of the United States. Lincoln had emotional poverty. I mean, he lost so many people in his life. And as you study Lincoln, like I'm a little bit obsessive on like his yarns and stories. Lincoln didn't just set out to be funny. Lincoln was funny and used humor as a way of connecting with people and also his fallback. So, it's kind of, analogous to like, books in general. It's not like, oh my goodness, you read so many books, you're so well read. It's like, no, books teach you that you don't really know anything as you read more. So Lincoln also, as I've become very involved with law firms all around the world and in court cases, I've used Lincoln as a competitive advantage in being able to relate and apply his life and lessons. And then, of course, generally speaking, it's not the worst thing in the world for people to think of Samir and be like, this who's the Indian that knows a lot about Lincoln, and people generally want to learn. He's a subject that people are interested in, especially when you have deep, unique, and dare I say at times humorous knowledge. And I think some of my best memories are, people laughing when we're talking about Lincoln, and Lincoln called laughter the universal evergreen of life.
Wow. I can't think of anybody that would say, Lincoln wasn't a good guy. Yeah, I'm not, I don't align with him. He was very positive, very likable, very charismatic. You can't say that about all political figures in history.
Well said,
Very
Lincoln.
unique. You said something
Yeah.
before, and I heard this quote the other day, not from Lincoln, but it's in line with what you said. Sir Isaac Newton. What we know is a drop. What we don't know is an ocean. So we think we have all the answers, or God, I got a good grip on insert subject. No, you don't. There's so much more to learn about everything in our universe, in our world. Every day's a learning experience, right?
You can learn something from everyone. Leaders of learning. And when maybe they're negative role models, you can learn a lot from those people too. But
Sure.
I'm not sure who it was, but the appropriate line I oftentimes use is that in one day there exists more to leaders of learning than there does to the unenlightened follower in the longest of lifetimes.
When you look at Lincoln, and not being negative here, but your view, where did he fall short? Where even his emotional intelligence, where do you think that there was some deficits for him? Maybe he admitted them.
Well, any person, you can find the pros and cons. So with Lincoln, if there was a flawless person, it was him. But if you want to look at, some of the areas of deficit, I mean, he was scarred, and so it was hard for him to open up to people, particularly women. Now he was very gracious and courteous with women, but they had like a different category. He also had, and I don't think the word is flawed. I think there were just a few things that Lincoln did that he regretted, like anybody. A couple of those. One, he almost had a duel with a gentleman, when he lived in Springfield, and he used to write anonymously for the Whig newspaper, and his friends got him out of that duel because he's so honorable, he went to do it. There's this funny story when Lincoln was in the Springfield legislature, and the long short of it is that the Whigs wanted to block the Democrats from passing a particular resolution. So most of them stayed home, his party, but three of them, Lincoln and two others, went there to make sure roll call was taken. It didn't pass. Well, the Democrats were smart. They got all these other people to come there and show up who weren't going to be there. And then they needed their votes. And so they barricaded themselves, I believe, in a bathroom on the first floor. And then they were ordering, the kind of the court jesters to go open the door and get them out. Well, the three of them climbed out of the window and left. And, Lincoln, of course, was the butt of jokes for that. And he was very embarrassed about that. Like, basically, he shouldn't have showed up. He should have handled it differently. So much so that later in life, when anyone would bring up that incident, he would find a way to change the subject.
Wow. I'm fascinated. Very, very honestly, Samir, I'm going to research him. A while back, I got turned on to Ernest Hemingway. I talked to an author, and then that, opened my eyes. And very interesting, his life and how he was very accident prone too. I'm going to look into Lincoln. It has been wonderful and refreshing talking with you today.
Thanks, Steve, mutually. Thanks for the time. Thanks for hosting.
We went to all different areas today, from AI to your organization that empowers women to the fascinating side of Lincoln. Amazing. If somebody wants to find you, reach out to you, Samir, what's the best way?
Yeah, I mean, if you Google Samir Somal, you'll see my email address kind of everywhere. You go to my first name, SAMEER.SOMAL, or no dot at .com. My email address. I'm reach out to me, request me on LinkedIn. I try to be responsive, and I'm in the business of building friendships, because I think that's where human beings ultimately, Steve, derive happiness. I remind myself every day, some people are so poor, all they have is money. So it's a pleasure to be here, and look forward to following up with you and making a new friend.
Yes, I was just going to say that. I'm going to find you on LinkedIn and connect with you, at least at the starting point. And looking forward next time we get together.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. All right, we'll be right back.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.